If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths and sometimes heights to ensure the power is always flowing, which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, broadcasting live every Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. Central from Panama City Beach, Florida, home of the world's most beautiful beaches. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining me on my weekly broadcast. Every week, I'll feature some of the best instructors, coaches, authors, and entrepreneurs in the golf business today. I begin with a great discussion on Coach's Corner, followed by an insightful interview with my special guest. So let's get started by introducing tonight's Coach's Corner panel. All right, good evening, everybody, and once again, welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and we've got a great show for you this evening. We're going to be starting off, as always, with a great round here on the Coach's Corner panel with two seasoned professionals, if you will. They're going to be joining us in the conversation. And then a little bit later on in the show, I'm going to be joined by my very special guest, Danielle Ammaccapane, who is a former LPGA professional and now currently plays on the Legends Tour, among other things. We're going to talk to her a little bit later on the broadcast. One thing, just a quick program note I want to mention, not program note, but something I wanted to mention is obviously we are post-Hurricane Laura, which went through parts of the Emerald Coast yesterday, actually early this morning, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the families who stayed behind. Hopefully everybody is safe and sound, and we know there's a lot of devastation, a lot of damage, but buildings can be replaced, lives cannot. So very grateful for those that got out of harm's way and found shelter elsewhere, and for those that did stay behind, again, hopefully everything is okay, and by all intents and purposes from what we've heard so far, there has been very minimal personal loss through the storm. So our thoughts and prayers go out to those along the Emerald Coast, and particularly the Lake Charles area, which took the brunt of the storm, again, about 1 to 2 a.m. this morning. So, again, our thoughts and prayers are with the families there. As I mentioned, we're going to be joined here by a couple of great guys in just a moment on the Coach's Corner panel, but let me remind everybody that Golf Talk Live is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing top-quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And, of course, Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instructional magazine, offering insightful reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top PGA and LPGA teacher professionals, all designed to help improve your game from tee to green. So subscribe today at golftipsmag.com. Excuse me. All right. First up on the panel is, of course, John Decker, and he is a PGA instructor, motivational speaker. He's also a senior editor and top 25 instructor with Golf Tips Magazine. In 2015, he was the Southern Ohio Teacher of the Year. And prior to that, he was the head instructor at the Grand Cypress Golf Academy, where he worked under top 100 instructors Fred Griffin and the late Phil Rogers. He's also the author of Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game, which, of course, has an accompanying Bible study. And Clint Wright, of course, is a 30-year member of the PGA, and he's also a partner at TGM. And one of the best, in my opinion, in the short game. He's been teaching for many, many years and has been regular here on the Coach's Corner. And I want to thank both of you guys for joining me. Guys, welcome to the Coach's Corner panel.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you, Ted.
All right, appreciate it. All right, so Clint, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you tonight.
Okay.
We're going to talk about a number of different areas, And, particularly for beginning golfers who don't want to get bogged down with a lot of golf tips, which typically can be aimed at better players or more advanced golfers. Really, we're trying to give you a few simple ideas that might help and a few tips that might be able to help elevate your game into a little bit better status. So here are some examples we're going to talk about tonight: preparing for the round, hitting it further. Obviously, we want to see if we can get more distance. Making good club choices, meaning selecting the right club for you given the circumstance. We're going to talk a little bit about shots around the green and, of course, the mental game. So, Clint, I want to start with you on this and talk about when it comes to practice and preparation and how can golfers, and this is a question I'm sure we've all been faced with, is how can I get better results from my practice round, and how should I warm up before a round of golf? Because they're two uniquely different areas of the game, if you will, in preparation. One involving working on different fundamentals and so forth, and the other is obviously what we're going to do before we get ready to tee it up on the first tee. So talk about both of those. Start off, if you wouldn't mind, with practice. What are some things that the folks can do to put together a better practice session, and then what should they be doing instead of when they're getting ready to warm up for a round?
Okay, that's a good question. I think the practice session has to start with the previous round or the previous several rounds. That if you're gathering data and you're really genuinely trying to improve how you play, some of the information or data you get out of those previous rounds, like how many fairways you're hitting, curvature of the ball, are you missing more greens to the right than you're missing to the left, things of that nature. Then you have to go to the practice range with a reason or a purpose of what you're trying to accomplish with that small bag of balls or maybe the large bag. I had a young gal that worked for us years ago, and I went out and hit some balls, and she said, well, how'd it go? I said, my practice sessions are always good. Always. She said, no, you can't do that. I said, yeah, they're always good because I go out there with a purpose, and if I accomplish that in 10 balls, I quit. If it takes 100 balls, I keep hitting them. I'm going to accomplish what I went out there for before I leave. And therefore, you're improving. You're not wasting time, not wasting just mindlessly hitting balls downrange. We all see a lot of that. They get a big bag of balls. I'm going to pull a Hogan here. I'm going to beat it out of the ground. And so I'm just going to hit balls and hit balls and hit balls. And they don't ever see any improvement because they're just slinging balls down the range instead of trying to accomplish what they went out there for. And if they'll go to that practice tee and I actually got some students, I said, I want you to write it down. Okay, write down what you're going out there for where you don't forget and try to accomplish that. And you do, then go chip and putt or do something else. But don't just stand there and hit balls down range and think you're getting anywhere. As far as the rounds, the warm-up portion before a round, personally, I always try to just focus on finding a rhythm. I'm going to loosen up a little bit, get the blood flowing, get my heart rate up a little bit maybe, but I want to find the rhythm of the day because my fundamental swing's not going to change from day to day. But my body rhythm might, I played 2 days ago and was running a little bit late and got to the golf course. It took me 3 holes to get my heart rate down. So my rhythm was really quick those first 3 holes. So we don't ever know what our rhythm is going to be that day. So it's always best to warm up, get your body moving. But I try to encourage people to focus on just find the rhythm for the day and try to mimic that and find it, and then go to the first tee and mimic that rhythm you found on the practice tee that day warming up. And with those two things, go to practice with a purpose to improve, find your rhythm for the day, and go out and enjoy your round.
Yeah, and that's a great advice. Thank you. And, I just to sort of add one more thing, I think one of the problems, and Clint, I think you would probably agree with this, that we see a lot of golfers do is they don't understand the difference between the two. A practice session is when you work on some of the different fundamentals that you may be struggling with, or you're working on certain areas of the game that you might feel that you fall short in. And that's what you do in a practice session. Warm-up, as you said, is to find your rhythm. Whatever game you brought that day to the golf course is what you're going to take out on the golf course. That's not the time to be tinkering around, adjusting grips, and and moving ball positions and things like that. You play with what you've got, but again, like you said, you want to find your rhythm. And I think a lot of people confuse that. They get out there and they hit a couple of bad shots in their warm-up, and they figure, well, I got to start making adjustments. So I got to move the ball back, or I've got to do this. And the next thing you know, they get out there and they've made so many changes before they've even hit the first tee that they're pretty much predetermined to have a difficult round. So that's a great advice.
You're right.
Just find your rhythm. Yeah, just find your rhythm in your warm-up and get out there and practice with a purpose when you're actually in a full-blown practice session. Great
That's
answers and great tips. John, I want to move to you, and this is a question that a lot of people come up with, and I'm going to give you, because they sort of work hand in hand, I'll let you touch on both of these, but everybody wants to hit it farther. It's all we hear about from the teaching professional side is when our students come in is, well, how can I hit it farther? What can I do to hit it farther? First and foremost, they want to know how they can add yards to their drives. And then they're all caught up in the numbers. They hear about, well, how can I improve my club head speed? Obviously, the faster the club head's going to move, and as long as you're making good solid contact, you're going to get further distance. But talk about those two areas there. How do we deal with club head speed? Is it as important as what a lot of people make it out to be? And how can we get some extra yards on our drives?
Well, first of all, Ted, thank you for having me on the show. And Clint, as always, I enjoy being on with you. I always pick up some good nuggets whenever I'm on the show with you. The first thing I look at when with any student with their driver and gaining distance is I'm going to start with their setup. And the first thing I look at is how high they tee the ball up. And I normally won't say anything. I'll kind of watch them to see what they do with their tee height. But if you want to get more distance, you need to tee the ball high so that you can sweep the ball off the tee. You're actually hitting slightly up on your driver, whereas the irons and the fairway woods and the hybrids, you're hitting slightly down. So there's a little bit, and that's why the tour players use the tees. If you look at the long drive guys, they're really teeing the ball up high. You want to have a wide stance. That's going to give you power, and you want to tilt your shoulder. So if you're a right-handed player, your right shoulder should be tilted lower than your left shoulder, and your head should be behind the ball. This is going to help create that swing path that's going to be slightly up on the ball to get the ball launched. You want to get the ball launched in the air. And then as far as the club head speed is obviously very important, but it's how you produce the club head speed. You want to produce the club head speed using your core muscles so that you're using your back and shoulders in the backswing, you're using your abs, your legs, in the downswing. That's the ideal scenario that you're looking for. But one of the things that really goes is very important to making sure that you're getting the right distance with your driver. And we're talking because that's the one thing the most common thing that students come in they either want to be more consistent with their irons or they want to hit longer drives. If you want to hit longer drives, it's very important to get your driver fitted. This is where you need to go to your local PGA club professional, and you need to sign up for a fitting. And it's very important to understand because if you don't have the right shaft in your driver, then it doesn't matter how good your swing is. You're probably not going to get the most out of your swing. The right shaft and the right loft on your driver is very important. And the biggest, one of the biggest mistakes I see with a lot of players is they'll come in with drivers that are 25 years old. They've got an 8.5-degree driver, and they're wondering why they don't hit the ball as far as their friends. And in that situation, you can buy a game. There's technology out here. If you're using a driver that's older than, say, 5 years, you're probably behind the curve. So you need to make sure and have good equipment. And really that's where the PGA club professional can really help, or go to a demo day. And then even some of the big golf warehouses are good for that as well. They have simulators and everything and getting their numbers. But, and the last thing I'll say about distance is if you want more distance, you need fitness. And golf fitness with the TPI certification, if you go to a pro that really knows what they're doing, or a physical, someone that specializes in TPI, you're definitely going to improve, because as your core muscles get stronger, you're going to be able to do what the instructor wants to do. And if I get somebody that's got a big belly and they're not in shape and they want to hit the ball farther, it's really hard for me to get them to get that, where they're using their back and shoulders and they're using their core muscles if they're out of shape. So adding the fitness into your routine. And not only are you going to play better golf, but you're going to feel better, and it's really going to help you in your daily life.
Yeah, a lot of people, again, just one thing I want to add, people have been under the impression, they've heard the expression swing the handle, and, once you get into the proper position, you can swing that handle as hard as you want, but they don't really understand that. And what they think a lot of times, I see a lot of amateurs, that they get the club up to the top and they think, okay, now I can swing as hard as I want. And what they're doing is they're actually leading with their hands. They're pulling their hands down as quick as they can, thinking that they're going to generate a lot of club head speed. And what ultimately ends up happening is they get out of sequence. So their upper body ends up leading their lower body, and they end up throwing or casting the club in the process, which adds all types of problems. And they think that that's the way to get club head speed. And you're exactly right in your analogy, John, is what you want to do is you want to have good core muscles, and you want to get the big muscles involved and turn and pivot onto your right hand side for right-handed golfers. And then as you swing through and transition to your left side, you want to, again, use those big muscles to rotate through. And a lot of people misunderstand that, and they think that they've just got to pull down on that handle or the grip, in other words, as hard as they can. And that's not going to get the desired results that they want, and exactly what you were talking about. Thank you for that, by the way, John. Clint, one of the other things that another area that a lot of amateur golfers struggle with, and that is the how to make good club choices. An example, many golfers, that struggle with their tee shots have often asked me, when should I use a 3-wood off the tee rather than a driver or even another fairway wood? And then the second question, I want you to answer both of them, and that is they're often short on their approach shots. How can they improve their club selection? So, again, going for the green as an example, they're always falling short. We see this in Pro-Ams all the time. They're just not good at making club selections. So talk about the first one, not always good to hit the driver off the tee if you're not doing well. How does a golfer decide when they should pull back and not take out the big stick? And then when it comes to their approach shots, again, they're a little bit short on when to make the proper selection.
Yeah, no problem. Good question again. Well, I've always looked at it from the green back, somewhat of what club to hit off the tee. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what club do I want to hit into the green and what do I want in front of me. So I'm going out there and I'm hitting my driver. I got a double direction miss today, one right, one left. When I get out there in the woods, I got trees in front of me. I'm not setting myself up well. So at that point, you got to think about, I just need to set myself up to have the easiest second shot. And, the third shot that we've talked about, this is the important shot. Mm-hmm. And so how do you set that third shot up? And if you're struggling with a driver, I mean, I used to have people come in and says, hey, would you help me learn to hit my driver? And I said, well, how you hit your 3-wood? He said, they hit it real good. I said, well, there you go. I just helped you hit your driver better. I mean, because it's a 1-wood, a driver, but it's the tee shot. It's not necessarily, I tell people, what the tee shot on the second hole technically does? From the rules, it puts you back in play. Because once so I don't see the driver as I just got to boom it. I'm trying to put my golf ball back in play. So whenever you're not putting it back in play well with a driver, then you might want to find the other club in your bag you can put it back in play well with. And that takes a little bit of turning your ego off, to say, guys, I'm not hitting my driver good today. I'm just going to bunt this 3-wood down the middle because now I'm just putting my golf ball back in play. So that's the attitude I think you can help you make better choices. Is if you're standing on that tee box thinking, I'm just going to put my ball back in play, then that'll help you with your decision making because your objective now becomes totally different. It's not how far I can hit it down the fairway. Is it how can I put this ball back in play? Second question, okay? Mm-hmm. And when they go out to the practice range, and here's where I think you run into problems. We all know that those range balls can either be marshmallows or they can be rockets. Yep. Okay? And they go out there and they hit that 8-iron one time with a rocket and it goes 155. They can't hit a regular golf ball 155 yards with an 8-iron for downhill downwind. But with that one range ball, They just rocketed that thing out there. So in their mind, well, I hit my 8-iron 155. Well, they probably, on average, hit their 8-iron 140, 145. And that's why I think you see so many people coming up short. You know, we today have the most accurate information from how far I'm from the flag that we've ever had in our business. Everybody's got a rangefinder. Everybody's got all the technology. They know to that flag, I'm 155, so that's an 8-iron. But they don't hit their 8. So I've always tried to get people to gauge the distance they hit their clubs off of 7 out of 10. You're going to hit a couple of bad ones. You're going to hit one real good one, but then you're going to hit about 7 of them about the same distance. So that's the yardage you want to use. Because every now and then you're going to leave it in the bunker, and every now and then you're going to throw it off the back of the green. But 7 out of 10 times you're going to be on that yardage that you want to hit. And you just have to understand those things. And I've always tried to get people to gauge off of, we all do, what do you hit 150 yards? You know, what club do you hit? If you took 10 balls and you hit this club, 7 out of 10 of them going to go 150 yards. And then you just have to work your way back off of that or in a little shorter, a little bit longer based on your circumstances. 150 yards uphill is a lot further than 150 yards downhill. We all know that. But you have to take that into account when you're making your club selection, that on flat ground, no wind, your 7-iron's a 150 club, but I'm uphill now. So that may turn it into a 6-iron. But if they're using just raw yardage, they're going to start coming up short a lot. A lot of factors in club selection other than yardage.
Right, and you know that's what I said when I started the bringing the questions to you is this is something that if you talk to a lot of tour players, this is probably 90% of the problem they see with most of the amateurs that they play with in the practice round or in the the pro-am part of it is that they see amateurs 90% of the time are under clubbing themselves. As you said, they're hitting their 8-iron thinking they're going to hit it 155 or even 160 on a good day, and they're falling short every single time. And
so therefore they don't hit it that far.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
They just don't hit it that far. Yeah.
Right. And you're exactly right. Depending on what range. I mean, I've been to some ranges and I'll be striping them out there and thinking, wow, my 7 or 8 iron's really cooking today. And I'll get out and have faced with the similar yardage and I'll end up being short. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I hit that one just as solid as I did in the range, but I fell 10, 12 yards short. And you're right. Sometimes you get a marshmallow, sometimes you get a rocket. I have to remember that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I'll have to remember that one.
I'm just trying to help y'all out. That's all.
I agree. I agree. All right, John, I'm going to come back to you. Here's another one too that a lot of folks I've heard them ask over the years, and I think it's and really they're both similar, the same question, but just in reverse. And you'll understand in a moment. But some players will come to me and say, they hit their ball very low. They want to know what they can do to hit to get a higher trajectory on their shots. And in the reverse, some players are hitting it very, very high, but need every once in a while to be able to hit a low trajectory shot. What can we do to help them?
Well, the first thing I would say, if you're a low ball hitter and you want more height on your shot, the first thing I would check is your ball position. Most likely the ball is too far back in your stance. I was taught in very much the similar way of Jack Nicklaus Golf My Way, that you pretty much play the ball inside of your left heel, just right inside of the left heel. And what changes is the width of your stance and your distance from the ball. So that's the easiest way to have a repeatable swing. I heard Tiger Woods say in a clinic one time, he said, if I want to hit the ball lower, I move the ball back 1 ball, not 6 inches, not 8 inches. I move it 1 ball. So that's his version of moving the ball back in the stance. And so I see a lot of amateurs who play the ball, right of center, and they'll play it. And if you're playing the ball right of center, you're going to either hit a really low shot or you're going to stick the club in the ground. So that's the first thing I would check for if you're hitting the ball ball too low and you want to get more height. So if you play the ball more forward, you're definitely going to see a higher ball flight, and that should help you hold the greens, because it's important to know when you're talking about distance, the 155 or 150 or whatever it is you're hitting your 7 or 8 iron. It really doesn't matter about total distance. What really matters is carry distance, because I see people who hit balls 100 yards that roll 50 yards. That's not going to work on the golf course. It might work on the driving range, but it does not work on the golf course. So it's very important that you know your carry distance. If you're hitting the ball too high, and you want to hit a lower ball flight, when I first I grew up in Western North Carolina, and the golf course was a mountain golf course, and it was very elevated. And so I learned to hit a lot. I had a really high ball flight, and that was the only way you could play in the mountains. If you hit the ball low, you could not get the ball to the green. So then when I went down to Florida and started playing on the mini tours, I was hitting those big high ball flight, and my ball was blowing all over the place because of the crosswinds, and I just was not used to playing in flat, golf courses like that. And so for me, being 6'4", I had a hard time hitting a low ball flight. So the easiest way to hit a lower ball flight, if you hit the ball real high, number one is take extra club. So instead of taking an 8 iron, take a 7 iron. Number two is choke down on the club. What you're essentially doing is you're turning a 7 iron into an 8 iron when you choke down on it. And then number three is narrow your stance. If you'll do those three things, if you'll take an extra club or two, depending on how low you want to hit it, if you will narrow your stance and you'll choke down on the club, and then in your swing, you don't need to make a full high follow-through. Make more of a three-quarter follow-through. Tiger, famously has his stinger shot that he hits. Now, he's doing that with a long iron. Most amateurs out there, if they're trying to lower their ball flight, they're doing it with their wedges and 9 irons, 8 irons, and things like that. But those are some ways that you can lower your ball flight and not have to move the ball back in your stance. Because, see, what happens is when you narrow your stance, your center of gravity moves more to the left. When you widen your stance, your center of gravity moves more to the right. So what the tour players are doing is they're controlling their ball position by their weight distribution and how they narrow or widen their stance. On their drivers, they widen their stance because they want to launch it. When they want to hit a low shot into the wind, they narrow their stance. That gets their center of gravity more forward. It's much easier to do that than start moving your ball position all around. So those are some tips I think that will help the average golfer. But the number one thing to hit it lower, take more club than you need and make less swing.
Well said. And that goes back really to what we talked about in a practice and preparation. Those are things that you can work on when you're out there practicing with a purpose. You're out there working in a full-blown practice session. These are some things that the guys are talking about that we want you, the listeners, to pay attention to. Work on those things when you're in a practice session. Don't do them, obviously, when you're just warming up before a round. And if you do these things, and again, practice with a purpose. If you're trying to hit some low shots, those are what you want to work on. And as John just pointed out, when you start playing around with ball position, not saying you can't move it back or move it forward a little bit, but it's not as much as you might think. And I think a better way is, as John just pointed out, is just to either widen or narrow your stance. Can certainly help by moving your center of gravity forward or backwards, but also choking down and taking an extra club or two, depending on how low you want to hit the ball, and conversely, how high you want to hit the ball, you do the opposite. So some great points there, John. Clint, I know you like to talk about putting, and this is something that a lot of amateurs fall into. I'm going to give you two questions. One's going to be a putting question, and the other one is going to be bunker shot. One of the problems that a lot of amateurs have is the inability to stop lifting their head while they're putting. They want to see where that ball is going. They lift it, they come out of their stance, and the next thing you know, they've either pulled the putt or they've pushed the putt. You got a drill or something that can help do that? I know Jack Grout famously used to clench Jack Nicklaus's hair when he was getting him to not move his head. But what are some thoughts there? And then the second one is, while you're thinking about that, is people have struggled in the bunker shots, especially greenside bunkers, taking too much sand, and the ball ends up not coming out of the bunker. So let's talk about the green first, about keeping that head steady, and then talk about the bunker shot.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Well, I don't see this as what I'm about to say is not a drill. People have to, I believe, understand there's more to putting than just the movement of the arms and the putter. A lot more to it. We all know that, but they never pay attention to it. It's like we've talked many times about, trying to determine speed and what to look at and how to read the greens and begin to understand that lag putting is the most important putt you're going to hit today, because lag putting is what's going to eliminate 3 putts, not making 4-footers. But I teach people through a drill to how they putt, and you've all heard this one. And I teach people you want to stroke, hold, and look. That's how you putt. It's not a drill. You stroke the putt, you hold your finish, and then you look. That's how you putt. Now we begin to develop it in through a drill on the practice green. Obviously, we're going to stroke the ball. I want you to freeze your finish, hold it, and then you can look. And the way we look is very important. You don't look with your shoulders up. You turn your head to look. That's the drill. You stroke it, you freeze your finish, turn your head, watch the putt. And that'll keep their spine angle correct, okay, all the way through the putting stroke. But I believe that they have to become understanding that that's how you putt. And if they watch people on television, they will see it in a lot of different forms, but it's stroke, hold, and look. Now, some people hold longer and then look. Some people look a little quicker, but they're all holding that finish and holding the spine angle all the way until the ball's towards the hole. Okay? And whether you look up early or look up late, the ball's going to be going where it's going, And like I said, like I tell people, we joke about it, I've never seen anybody lose a ball on the green. You're going to find it. So you don't have to look so early to find out where it's going. So stroke, hold, and look becomes your process of putting, not just a drill. And I think that'll help people maintain their spine angle, maintain the flow through the ball, and improve their putting dramatically. Bunker play. Well, we all know that there's all different kinds of bunker sand that we see. Like the course that I'm at right now, the bunkers are firm. They're kind of like tour quality. They keep them firm. And so there's one thing there. But the general thought pattern, you have to allow the club to do the work for you. The sand wedges with the bounce and the angles that we have today will do a lot for you if you will trust it. What I see with most people in bunkers is they don't finish their swing through the ball. Okay, mm-hmm. I was taught years ago by I think one of the best teachers out there about bunker play, and he said, all you have to do is understand if you take the sand that's behind that ball and make it go on the green, the ball will be in front of it. It's the ballistics of the sand that's going to put that ball on the green. If you get that started and you learn to do that, then you can begin to develop some different techniques by laying the club open more, getting more bounce, less bounce, depending on the type of conditions you're looking at. Obviously, we have firm bunkers. We don't need as much bounce on the club, so you don't lay it open quite as much. You got fluffy sand, you need a lot of bounce, so you roll it open, get maximum bounce off of that thing. But every one of those shots, the success of it will be determined by you being aggressive. Okay? Don't be afraid of the shot, because it's the only shot in the game of golf that you don't make contact with the ball. You just got to get close. Okay? But you have to be aggressive. You have to take that sand and make it move out of that bunker, and the ballistics of the sand will take the ball with it. So one tip that I would give is that if you do nothing else, like I was told, always get it out of the bunker you're in. If it ends up in the bunker on the other side, so what? But get it out of the bunker you're in. So be aggressive, let the club work for you, and you change the bounce angles based on the conditions of the sand.
Yeah, well said. I think a lot of times it goes back to practicing. And these are things that a lot of our amateur golfers fall way short. They might go in and hit one or two bunker shots, and they get it out the first time and think, okay, I'm good. And, that might be fine. But again, depending on where you're playing, if you're playing different courses, sometimes conditions can change. One course, the sand could be a little firmer. Another course could be a little bit more soft. So, again, you have to understand that. And that's where practice with a purpose, I think, comes in, helping you in these different areas. Well said, Clint. Thank you. John, this is another area. We're going to stick around the green a little bit here. Questions that I'm often faced with is, how can I stop hitting fat or thin pitch shots is the first one, and avoid hitting the ball thin on, say, a soft lob shot. This is an area, too, that a lot of amateurs kind of miss the boat on. Maybe you can share some of the techniques and what needs to happen here. So let's start with just our typical wedge shots. We get a lot of people hitting them fat or thin, and it's not even so much an issue of direction anymore. It's just quality of contact. And then, of course, when they want to get a nice high, soft lob shot, more often than not, they're skipping it across the green or blading it or what have you, or they're digging, 2 inches behind it because they're coming down. So talk about both of those areas a little bit and see if we can help some folks.
Well, one of the biggest problems that I see amateurs make in the wedge game is they tend to play the ball too far back in their stance, and they tend to get their hands too far in front of the ball at setup. And what this does is this exposes the leading edge. Now, whether they're trying to hit the ball 5 feet or 100 yards, this is going to cause the club to stick into the ground. And so when your club is sticking in the ground like that, that's where you get the heavy shot or the chunk shot. The other thing is they use their hands way too much in their swing. They don't use enough rotation to get their power from. So this goes back to the things that, I talked about earlier, is making sure that your ball position is correct, making sure that you're playing the ball more inside of your left heel. You don't want to let that ball start getting way, way back in your stance. Whether it's a wedge shot or a pitch shot, your ball position is going to be, just about with a full wedge shot would be about an inch or so inside of your left heel. It doesn't need to get farther back than in your stance, because when you play the ball farther back, you can't rotate. You can't. So you have to use your arms and your hands. If you do rotate and turn to the target, you're gonna completely miss the ball. So those will help you in your full wedges. And really not changing. You're not really changing what you're doing in the full swing. You're just basically changing the club. As far as the short game goes and around the greens, again, when you get those hands way out in front, you're going to stick the club into the ground. And so what you want to, Clint kind of alluded to this, is using the bounce of the club. The bounce is very important. And if you don't know what the bounce is, you need to go to your local PGA club professional and have them explain to you where the bounce is and how to use the bounce. But simply this put is, when you open the club face, you use more of the bounce, which allows the club to slide. So anytime my ball is sitting in a position where I need to slide it under the ball, I want to open up the club face, whether I'm using my lob wedge or sand wedge, and even sometimes with my gap wedge. In certain situations, if I have a lot of green to work with, I might open up the face a little bit. This is going to help keep the club from sticking. I would much rather hit pitch shots on firm ground than wet ground. Wet grass is very difficult. You're going to tend to make a little bit more divot. So the most important thing that I would tell all the listeners out there, if you're struggling around the green with your pitching, whether you're hitting it fat or thin, it's essentially your club is hitting the ground before it hits the ball. It's either sticking in the ground or it's hitting the ground, bouncing into the ball, and you're blading it. What you need to do is make your rehearsal swings. So if I have a tight lie pitch shot, which is an extremely difficult shot, it's more difficult than the bunker shot Clint was just talking about. The difference is, though, I can make practice swings. And what I want to do, because most of the time you're not going to be on level ground. You're going to be on an uphill, downhill, ball below your feet or ball above your feet. Make those rehearsal swings and kind of see where your club is bottoming out. And that's where you want to play the ball. You want to, and don't just stand there and do it, rotate as if you're hitting the shot. But start paying attention to where the club is hitting the ground. If you're not hitting the ground, that's a problem. That means something's off in your setup. So you've got to find the bottom of your swing in this practice swing. So when I'm pitching around the green, I make a lot of practice swings. I try to find the bottom, and then I set up to it, and then I commit to the shot and go from there. So those are extremely frustrating shots around the greens because that really starts adding up on your score. And I've always said, if you really want to improve your scores, if you're really focusing on your scores, the most important thing to work on is your pitching, because most of you are not going to hit the greens in regulation. And there's a lot of days when I go out there where I don't hit the green in regulation. So I know if I'm good with my lob wedge, my sand wedge, hitting pitch shots, high shots around the green, being able to go over trouble, I'm going to be able to save my score.
Well said. It all boils down really to technique. And once you have that understanding of how to set up properly and get those fundamentals down pat, and the only way to do that is to go and obviously work with a professional such as the two gentlemen that are on the show tonight. And, I think once you get that guidance and learn how to put the ball in place correctly and how to set the club correctly behind the ball and how to grip the club and so on and so forth. And once you do that, it's just simply a matter of go out and practice those things and get them to the point where they become second nature. Too many club golfers get out there and they don't really pay attention to what they're doing, and they're changing everything, as I mentioned earlier. They're changing everything. 1 minute they're gripping it this way, the next minute they've strengthened it, they've weakened it, they're moving the ball position all over the place, and the round just sort of, goes kaput. And this brings me to a question for you, Clint, and this happens time and time again with many of our recreational golfers come into the same category, and that is falling apart on the back nine after you've played a great front nine. So how can I avoid, if I'm out there and I've got 18 holes to play and I've had a really good front nine, and then all of a sudden I don't know what's happening, the wheels fall off the bus, I don't know what goes on, but the back nine just seems to go, what can I do to change that?
Well, that's a tough question, Ted. I mean, because it could vary for a lot of different reasons.
You're welcome.
It could be here you go. A psychological. Yeah, thank you. From a psychological standpoint, if you shoot a good round on the front side, expectations are going to go up for the back nine. They're out there, they got their cart way before the horse, adding up the score, and they start thinking about, well, this could be my best round ever. There's a lot of demons that creep in on things like that, and because you also see just the flip side of that. They get off to a bad start, have a terrible front nine, and they play their best golf on the back nine because that expectations. This is not a special round, so you just relax and go play the back nine and have a really good 9 hole. So it kind of flips either way. So I think a lot of it's psychological. The other side too is that some golf courses the back nine might be a little harder than the front nine in reverse, or you've got this one hole that you just don't like, and so you're dreading getting to it. If you can get past those first 3 holes on the backside and get past number 14, you're going to have a good round, and you get to 14 and make a quadruple bogey, because you're just expecting that to be a problem for you. So, and then there's the physical side. And particularly for some of our players that are getting older, and like I am, and we all are, is that fatigue will begin to set in. So it's very important to keep your hydration level up and have a little snack at the turn. Nothing major or heavy, just a energy bar or something to keep your energy level up. And hydration is critical, particularly in the summer, for those last 3 or 4 holes coming home, because fatigue and getting tired and not be able to manage your body through the ball like you were for the first 5 or 6 holes is a reality. You got to be careful with that. And so with those things in mind, I think it's very difficult. We always will just stay in the moment, play one shot at a time. Those are great cliches, but they're very difficult to do when you're excited about having a good front nine and moving on to the back nine. But you really have to do those things. You just have what's in front of me. I'm going to play this shot, and I'm going to play the next shot. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and try not to allow those thoughts to creep in, but which are very difficult not to allow them in. So, I think, and if you see that pattern happening a lot, what you should do is try to get to the golf course one morning early and see if the golf pro or the manager or the starter will let you start on the back nine first. Play the back nine. If you start having trouble on the back nine all the time, you want to play the back nine first. Find out if it's that side, if it's whatever it is. Flip the nines over and see what happens. There was a golf course I played years ago that the sixth hole I just couldn't figure out how to play it. So late one evening, I took my shag bag out there off the tee box, and I said, I'm going to figure out how to play this hole. And finally figured out, okay, here's how I need to play it, and to get past this really difficult hole that was getting into my head all the time. And if it's the back nine getting into the head a lot, they need to flip it over and see if they can break that thought process to where they can play that nine as well or with the same confidence level that they play the nine that they like. Okay? Very similar to we all have the favorite club. We always have the club we don't want to hit. We do anything to hit the favorite club and do anything to avoid the club I don't like. I always encourage people to try to figure out how to hit them all if you can. Have some confidence with all your clubs. Have confidence going to that back nine after you've had a good front nine. And those things you just have to you learn. It's not something that's natural. And try to, I guess the old cliche is just don't add them up until you get done. Is the easiest way to look at it. But, do anything you can to break that rhythm if you start seeing that happen all the time. It's happening once in a while. It's just you have a good nine and a bad nine. But if it's something that's beginning to be a pattern, you have to figure out how to break it. And switching the nines, playing a hole differently, just break the rhythm somehow and see if that'll help you.
Well said. Just to sort of quickly recap on that, you're exactly right in your analogy. There's a bunch of different areas that a lot of our club golfers fall into, and you hit right off the one right off at the top, and that was the score. More often than not, many golfers, once they've had a good front nine, they start getting excited and they think, wow, I'm on my way to maybe for the first time to break 90 or to break 80 or whatever the case may be. And right away, the anxiety levels, the energy levels build up. And instead of hitting that 7-iron 150 yards, their adrenaline's starting to rush because they're excited. And the next thing you know, all of those distances start coming out of, and we see that even on the tour level when they start getting a good round together. So here are a couple of areas that really folks need to pay attention to that Clint very eloquently discussed, and that is first and foremost, throughout your entire round, stay hydrated. Don't just drink water. There might be some good drinks out there that contain electrolytes that are good as well, especially if you're out here in the heat of the summer. It can get pretty steamy down here in Florida and up where you are, Clint, in the Carolinas, and really all over the country. But some areas more than others can get really, really hot. So you want to stay hydrated. The physical side, as John pointed out, you've got to keep yourself in shape. If you're not exercising, you're not getting out there and building up that stamina, more often, especially with some of our older club golfers, they get out there and by the time they hit the turn, their energy levels are down. The momentum's lost. They've had a good front nine, but they're having trouble keeping steam going for the second nine. And a lot of that is just not being in good shape and not taking care of yourself. So get out and walk and get out there and do other things to keep yourself and build your stamina up. And that also falls into, again, energy levels with eating. Have a snack around the turn. As much as it might be tempting to scarf down a chili dog or have a couple of beers or something, we want to have fun and we want you to enjoy it. But the truth of the matter is, and I'm going to get to that in the last part of it, but have something that's healthy, something that's going to give you some energy. And I don't mean hopped up energy. I'm just saying good fuel for the body. And that might be something like even as simple as a banana or half a sandwich or something like that that's going to give you some energy to carry you through the next 9 holes. And the last one is what I would say is hold the celebration. Wait until the round's over. If you've got a good round going in that, don't start celebrating halfway through it. Wait until you get back and you're hitting into the 19th hole. then you can have a little bit of celebration. Have a couple of beers to look back and talk about your great round. And if you want to have that chili dog or a burger or something like that, by all means, that's when the time to do it if you're going to do it. But don't do it during a round because you're just going to zap yourself of energy. And as Clint mentioned too, the other thing is sometimes it becomes a mental issue where you consistently start having a bad back nine, and then it sort of gets into your psyche, and the next thing you know, you're having a great front nines all the time, but Lord help you when that back nine comes around, everything falls apart. So switch it around. Start with the back nine. If those holes typically give you trouble, start off there and see if you can turn it around and break that cycle. But and when you're in doubt, go and visit your local professional. Get them to help you through that as well. But those are some areas that I think a lot of folks struggle with, and I think if you pay attention, you're smart about things. Again, we want you to have a good time when you're out there. But if you're knocking back 3 or 4 beers in a round and you're dehydrated and you're not eating good food and you're focusing on your score all the time, you're not going to have a good round overall. You're lucky if you had a good front nine. John, I'm going to give the last one to you, and this sort of falls into a little bit about what we're talking about here. And sometimes starting off the round, a lot of people are very, very nervous getting off that first tee and just not able to get it under control. And of course, this falls up into the mental side of the game as the previous question. What are your thoughts there? How do we get our nerves in check? Everybody is obviously nervous, and some nervousness is good. Little butterflies is okay, but sometimes people get a lot of anxiety with this. So how can we help them get ready to hit their first tee shot of the day? What can we do to calm things down?
Well, first of all, when I work, especially with tournament golfers, with younger players or people who are playing in their club championship, and they talk about being nervous, and I have some ladies sometimes who are, they get nervous, playing with other women that they've never played with, and we all get nervous. If you're nervous, you're nervous. The difference is a tour player is used to it. And so one of my favorite quotes is from Raymond Floyd. He said years ago, he says he tries to ease himself into the round. And so what that means is early on in the round, you don't want to take a lot of chances. You don't want to take a lot of risky shots. You want to focus on, obviously, hitting the ball in the fairway, when you get in the fairway, hitting the ball on the green. If the pin is tucked behind, 3 bunkers on the first hole, playing more to the middle of the green, and especially if you're, out there 150 yards or more. So, you're not taking a lot of excessive chances. That is one way, because anytime you do something where you, like, for example, you drive it into the trees on the first hole and you sit there and you go, wow, I could hit right through that gap and I'm going to go for it on the first hole. You might be better off on the first hole to just play out sideways, get in the fairway. Now, if you're late in the round and maybe you need something, you need a little burst and you feel confident you can hit the shot, then that might be a little different. But I never try to take chances early in a round. So I want to ease myself in the round because I'm already nervous. The second thing I tell my students is I want you to be nervous because that means you care. The difference is I don't want you to be scared. I don't want you to be afraid to swing the club. I want you to use the adrenaline, and this is where Tiger, I think, is just a world beater at this. I think Nicklaus was the same way. He is able to channel the nervous energy he has, and he's able to calm himself down through his breathing. You can see him do this if they get a real up close shot of him, and he breathes. He's making sure he's getting a lot of oxygen deep down to the diaphragm. It's very important that you do this. And I think if you feel yourself making your heart's pounding and your legs are shaking and you feel, all that anxiety going on, the first thing that you need to do is start breathing. Don't drink yet. Drink later at the turn. That came out the wrong way. Start breathing. Start breathing. Start, getting the oxygen into you, and that will definitely help you. And then as you're playing in the round, I think that it's basically from there. It's learning how to manage yourself around the golf course. And one of the things that I used to always do in my management is my favorite club. I loved my 3-wood when I was playing in tournaments. And so even if it was a par 5, a lot of times, especially if it was a par 5 where I knew I couldn't reach it in 2, I would use my 3-wood, especially if it was early in the round, because I was like, I know I can get this in the fairway. And I always tell them, I don't care if you've got to go down to your 6 or 7 iron. Pick a club that you know that you can get into the fairway off the first tee. And I know realistically most people aren't going to hit a 7 iron off the first tee. But I have a lot of my newer players hit their hybrids, and I prove it to them on the driving range. If you tee up your hybrid, you're probably going to do better than you're going to do with your driver if you're a new player. Or if it's an extremely tight hole, there's a lot of trouble out there, then, making sure that you're hitting a club that you know you can get to the fairway. And the last thing I'll tell you is your diet is very important. You do not need to drink a lot of coffee. If you have a morning tea time, you don't want to be all hyped up. You don't want to be drinking sodas during your round. That's sugar. That's not going to do you any good. If you are going to take in sugars, it needs to be through, some of your Gatorades and sports drinks and stuff like that. But I try to just drink water. And a lot of the tour players, when I was out on tour in 2008 with Bob, I noticed a lot of them would dilute they would take an energy drink out of the cooler. They would pour half of it out, and then they would pour water on top of it. You don't need to. I mean, that stuff has got a lot of sugar in it. You don't need all that sugar. So I think if you water it down a little bit, that's a safer way to go. Because if you drink too much caffeine before your round, you're not going to do well, especially when you're on those first couple of holes.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, we've seen that too many times with a lot of golfers is they're the other side of the coin between drinking too much alcohol obviously is not good. And, again, we want people to have fun. And, it's meant to be a fun round. But I've and this is just my own personal experience, I always found myself played worse, if I tried to have a couple of beers through the round. And because to me, it didn't relax me. It actually did the opposite. And for me, I enjoyed having a few cold drinks after my round. We could sit and talk about it, have a few laughs with my friends when we used to play a lot, and even a few clients here and there. And I don't knock anybody from doing that, by all means. But again, if you're out there and it's 90 degrees and you've got humidity in that, and you're drinking that alcohol, or you're drinking a lot of coffee, and coffee is a diuretic, so it's going to literally go through you very quickly. And especially out in that heat, it's going to hop you up. You're going to, get the jitters and whatnot. And then also, too, what often happens is whatever goes up comes down. You become very lethargic as well, whether that's alcohol or even coffee. After a while, when that sort of high or temporary buzz, as they put it, kind of comes off, then you start to get a little bit lethargic. And then that's sometimes why you don't have that stamina for the rest of your round. So some great advice, guys, some great tips tonight on the panel. Discussion. I appreciate it. And I'm going to give each of you an opportunity just to share with the folks how they can reach you if they want to connect, and maybe if they got any follow-up questions they'd like to ask. So, Clint, I'm going to let you go first, and then John.
Okay. All right. Hey, Ted, this was a great show. This could have very well been if people will take the tips that we all put out there tonight, the game's going to get better without a doubt. It's a great show. Mm-hmm. John, I always enjoy it. If they want to get a hold of me, it's real easy. It's clintgoff001@yahoo.com. Be more than happy to respond back to them, and look forward to doing the show again. But this show was great. Great tips, and people will take it and use it. Their game will certainly improve. So I'll look forward to next time. Yeah, no problem. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Clint. And John?
Ted, again, thank you for having us on the show. And Clint, as always, I really enjoyed being on with you. It's been, I think this is our first time this year, and every time I'm on with you, I always pick something up. If the listeners out there want to get in touch with me, I'm on all the social media platforms under John Decker Golf Instruction, and my first name is spelled Jon, so John Decker Golf Instruction. You can go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, so I'm on all those channels. I'm also writing, as you mentioned earlier, with Golf Tips Magazine, and I have a feature called Fairways to Heaven. So I'm really excited about that. And my book, Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game, is available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and Walmart.com.
Perfect. Well, guys, as always, thank you very much for joining me on the panel tonight, and I look forward to you guys coming back the next time. And have a great weekend. Hopefully the weather will be good and you'll be able to get out and and teach some golf and maybe even play a little bit yourself. So as always, Clint and John, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you next time here on Coach's Corner.
All right,
Thank
good
you,
night,
Ted.
guys.
All right, that was the tonight's panel on Coach's Corner, Clint Wright and John Decker. Always enjoy having the guys on here, and of course each week for if you're just tuning in for the first time, we have different guys come on every week and try to mix it up a little bit. Some of them come back a little more often than others, just more flexibility in their schedules, but always enjoy having some different thoughts and different viewpoints. And I think, as Clint had pointed out, I think tonight was a good one. I think tonight was a good discussion on some things a lot of amateurs have difficulties and struggle with for their own game, and hopefully we helped you a little bit. And what I always like to suggest to people is if we've, if you've come in late into the show and maybe you missed some of it, at the end of the show, wait a little bit. Of course, the shows are live every Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. Central, but you can go in and you can check it out. And you can go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live after the end of the show, and you can go back and scroll down to the archive section. And usually within about 30 minutes to an hour after the show airs, you'll see the recorded version there. So you can always go back, and if you missed part of the show, you can go back and listen to it there. So appreciate everybody joining me this evening for the Coach's Corner segment. And now I'm very, very excited to welcome my very special guest this evening. We spoke just a couple of weeks ago, actually, for the first time ever, and had a great discussion. We're going to bring some of that discussion here to the show. And, of course, I'm talking about my very special guest, Danielle Ammaccapane. She is an LPGA professional and currently a Legends Tour player. She's just 5'5", but she started playing at the age of 12. She credits her mother and father and Bill Cornelius as the individual who most influenced her career. She married her husband, Rod Kessling, on January 6, 1996, and gave birth to her beautiful daughter, Laura Ann Kessling, in 2000, and her son, Denver Christian Kessling, in 2004. In addition to being a top golf professional, she owns a sports bar with her father in Phoenix, Arizona, and her sister Dina also plays on the LPGA Tour, and Danielle was also inducted into the Arizona State Hall of Fame back in 1997. So please welcome my very special guest, Danielle Ammaccapane. Good evening,
hey,
Danielle.
Ted,
how are you?
Hey,
I'm
good.
doing
How
very
are you?
well. I'm doing extremely well. Thank you very much for being my very special guest this evening. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, well, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
So before we get into some of the other things that you do, obviously golf has been a big part of your life, and I will occasionally throughout the next hour, I will let the folks know some of the highlights, if you will. You've got so many, I would have taken up the whole hour reading them all out. So that's why I had your intro a little short, because you've got too many things. But we can touch, or I'll let you actually, when we get into our conversation. But let's talk golf for a little bit, and then we'll get into some of the personal stuff in that we discussed a couple of weeks ago. But let's talk about you as a player. First and foremost, what was the deciding point? You obviously started playing golf very, very young. Did you know that you wanted to become a tour player at some point?
Well, actually, yes. I was very young when I actually thought I wanted to play on the LPGA Tour. I was actually 10 years old, I think, when I actually started when I was 10, and not really 12. I was maybe a little bit later, maybe when I was around 11, somewhere in that neighborhood. I was involved in a summer class that my mother had brought me to every single day for a whole month, and it was an all-day thing, and it was fun. They dove into teaching you, and then you would go play 9 holes, and you break for lunch and do all these kinds of things, and it was every day. I loved it. I loved the game back then, and I knew kind of at the end of that summer, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is cool. So I kind of knew at a very early age that's what I wanted to do.
What was it about the game? I mean, there's so many, obviously, as we grew up, there was so many other sports and that, but what was it about golf that really appealed to you?
Well, I think the fact that I had control over whether I did well or not.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a team player. I tried team sports, but it was hard for me because I put out so much effort, and I felt like, gosh, if we lost, I wasn't happy with that because I felt like I gave 100%, and if somebody else didn't give 100% and we didn't win, it didn't really sit well with me, and I guess I just wasn't one of those team sports kind of gals, and golf was one of those sports that I felt like, hey, if I put the effort in and I play well and I did, then I did it. Like nobody had an influence on that, and I loved that. I liked the feedback, and I liked the gratification that I got, and the way it felt when, if I put the work in and it came out, it was me, and that felt good to me.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think, when you put whatever effort in and that effort provides a reward in the case of a win of a tournament or an event that you're playing in, there's nothing more satisfying. It's all up to you. It's what effort you bring into it. Like you say, if you bring 100% into it, and obviously there are certain challenges, whether it be the course and obviously competitors that you're playing against, but it all falls onto you. It's how much effort you put into it and how much preparation you make. You're not relying, as you pointed out, on somebody else to sort of carry you through to the winner's circle, if you will. So I agree with that. It's a very individual sport. Obviously, there are some team competitions, a la, Ryder Cup and Solheim Cup and things like that. But for the most part, it's an individual sport. So everything falls on your shoulder. So you either win or lose based on what effort you bring to the golf course that day. So I agree with you, and I think it's what really makes golf much more unique than virtually every other sport out there. As I said, I wanted to mention a couple of things, and I want to go back to your amateur career a little bit before you turned professional. You had a very successful junior career. You won the 1984 Broadmoor Invitational and the 1985 U.S. Women's Amateur Public Links Championship. You went on to, as I mentioned, attend Arizona State University, where you won the 1985 NCAA Championship and the 1987 Pac-10 Championship. And you also represented the United States on the 1986 Curtis Cup team. So very, very early on, there were clear signs of not only success, but you knew in your mind at that point that you had some game and you had an ability to move on to professional level. Would that be fairly accurate?
Yes. That's pretty funny. Yes, that would be accurate. I just love the competition. I love to play, and a funny story, just kind of going back again to I just have to say this is pretty funny. I don't know if I probably would have gotten into something. I don't know if it was golf, but back when I was trying to figure out I love sports, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And my mom and my dad had gotten me into a little tennis league, and I thought maybe I wanted to play tennis because my mom was playing a lot of tennis, and I used to follow her around to the courts when I was younger, and she used to take me and my sister, and we'd have to sit and do all that. But I thought maybe tennis might be a great, sport for me. So I got involved in that. And at the end of that, the coach had a little team tournament, amongst all of us, and odd man out, myself, had to play against the teacher. And the teacher ran me all over the court. And I left that day saying, nope, that's it. I'm done with tennis. I'm not playing tennis anymore. I'm going to do another sport where I can be on the offense and I can feel good about, what I'm doing. I just felt like I was getting run all over the golf court, all over the court, and I don't like running anyways. And I thought, nope, this is not for me. So, yeah, so that's when I got involved in golf, and I just excelled in it. And I'm not exactly sure. I do actually know when, when I got into high school, that's when I really I loved the game, and kind of a weird thing happened to me that when I attended Thunderbird High School here in Phoenix, they did not have a gals team for me to join, so I actually had to try out and play with the boys, and they allowed me to play if I would qualify, so I did. And my freshman year, I played the number 5 person on the team, and as I went up through the ranks through my years there. I ended up playing number 1 and 2 my senior year, and did quite well. But had to play with the boys from the men's tees, carry my bag, and do everything that the boys had to do. And because of that, and I was really tiny back in high school, I had developed a wicked short game because of it. And because I couldn't get to any of the par 4s in regulation, and even the par 5s, everything was just, it was a lot. So, I mean, it was just chip and putt, and pitch and putt and everything. And I was able to play and just develop a really good short game. And that's what took me to college and then beyond that. And I credit everything about my game to that part of my life. I think if I had played against girls, I don't think I would have developed the way I did.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. There's a lot of players over the years that went through a very similar path to you. That, obviously, that particular time in their lives, they didn't have access to a golf team other than the boys' team, and they wanted to play. They wanted to get out there. There wasn't really a lot of options for them, so if they wanted to play, gosh darn it, they had to play on the boys' team. But I think it made them a better overall player because it raised the level of competition at that time, and it really made them work even that much harder. And as you said, you weren't hitting it as far, so you had to really have a tight short game in order to be able to really be competitive, and to go from, the number 5 spots in your freshman year to 1 and 2 in your senior, that's quite an accomplishment. So when you look back, would you agree with that assessment that it helped to propel you even more than if maybe that wasn't what had happened?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I credit that time in my life to my career. Therefore, after anything I did after that, I give credit to that. I mean, I can still remember to this day. I can go back and remember rounds of golf that I had and things that I was doing, the chips that I was hitting, the putts, and getting the ball. And the boys that used to play against me from the other schools and stuff just hated it. And they hated getting beat by a girl more than anything. And I didn't really look at it that way. I just looked at it as if I was just competing, and I just liked it, and it was fun, and I had to do what I had to do, and it was just hard for me, but I loved it. And they didn't like it very much, but in the end, that was the only place that I could play, and that's what I had to do. So yeah, it elevated my game in every way.
You at some point became a tour player and found yourself out on the LPGA tour competing, with some of the best in women's golf. Were you nervous when you first went out, or do you feel that you had a lot of confidence based on both your amateur and junior career when you first stepped out on the LPGA tour?
Well, I was confident, but I was also really nervous. I really didn't have any idea what it was going to be like out there, and certainly playing against ladies that I've been watching on television. And I can remember times playing with Joanne Carner and some of the greats of the game, Pat Bradley and Kathy Whitworth, Donna Capone, Nancy Lopez. I even played with Marlene Hagee way back. But I remember playing with these legends, and I just went, I am not going to get in anybody's way. I'm just going to, do my thing and try to stay out of everybody's way. And I did. And I didn't try to, I didn't want to feel like I wanted to ruffle the waters at all. And it took me 4 years before I won my first event. But I got good. I got better every year, and I learned how to play out there. It was tough because we had big crowds back then, and a lot of television, and the camera guys were walking behind you a lot, and it was really unnerving at times, and tough to focus at times. So it was just a big learning thing for me. It really was. But it was fun. It was fun, and I got better every year.
What was the first professional tournament that you won, and what thoughts when you walked off 18 knowing that you were the winner went through your mind?
Well, I know you don't know this, but my first two wins were right here in my hometown. Ironically enough, where I played high school boys golf on the team is where I won my first two LPGA tournaments. I won my first one in 1991 right here in Phoenix at Moon Valley Country Club, and turned around the very next year, came back and defended, and I won again. And that started my career. And you couldn't have asked for, a more memorable way to start a career, but to win at your home golf course where you grew up playing high school golf.
There has to be, I think, for anybody in your position who, wins a tournament, especially on your home turf, as it were, I think it's, as you pointed out, equally rewarding because, again, you've played in that area for a long, long time. You know a lot of the people that have come out to watch you play, and so obviously there's a little extra nervousness, if you will, and, of course, excitement. But it has to be equally rewarding to say, hey, I've walked these grounds for many, many years in my junior and amateur career, and here I am in a professional event, and I'm putting it away and making it that my first win. So that has to add to the extra excitement. Let me ask you, at some point you became a member of the U.S. Solheim Cup, and going back to what you talked about earlier, where that really wasn't your forte. Did you enjoy that experience as much as you did playing by yourself? I mean, obviously you're supporting your team and so forth, but was that a bigger struggle for you playing on a team at that point?
Well, not a struggle because you're representing the United States, and I couldn't have had more fun being a part of that team. Unfortunately, both teams that I was on, both the Solheim and the Curtis Cup, I was on losing teams. So I guess maybe you could say I'm not saying that it's my fault that we lost, but right. I was on two losing teams, and I for the life of me can't figure out because I won some matches, but didn't fare very well in my singles matches. But I was always a pretty good match player back in my amateur career, my junior career. I was really good at match play and playing one-on-one. I don't know why I didn't have as much success on those teams as I should have. But I was so happy to be there on both those teams, and I just don't know. You see a lot of players, even on the PGA Tour, some of them just don't do well. And maybe I just don't do well. But I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and it wasn't that I didn't want to be there and I didn't play. I played well. I just didn't win. I didn't win enough. And but it's just one of those ironic things that happened.
Well, and Tiger comes to mind as a good example of what you're talking about. Tiger has played on many a Ryder Cup, and yet when you look at his record, it was not stellar compared to his solo career, if you will. And I think you're right. I think some players just are very, very solid in their own right, but in a team format, for some reason, it just does not fit. It's almost like, Jack Nicklaus famously said certain courses didn't fit his eye. I think that's true when it comes to team golf. I think it does not fit as well for some players as it does for others. Others went on and actually played much better, whether it be the Ryder Cup or Solheim Cup or Curtis Cup, but didn't play as well in their solo career. So it can have the opposite. Some fed off of their teammates a little better than others, and were able to get out there and create the charge and come through very successfully. And yet, when they were out there on their own, didn't seem to be as the wins didn't seem to be as forthcoming. In other words, let me ask you something. As a tour player, you've had a lot of time in various tournaments to play with amateurs. What were some of the things that you saw amateurs do And obviously, I'm sure, like many of the pros, you tried to help them as best as you could during those times. What were some of the common things that you saw a lot of amateurs, mistakes, in other words, that you would see them make in the pro-ams?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question. I saw everything. I saw everything in the 20 years that I played.
That's a big list.
Saw it all. And the list is long. Everything. There wasn't anything that I didn't see. I saw guys top it, hook it, slice it, hit it way up in the air, hit them on the ground. It was all over the place. Ran into quite a few really good players. I was on some winning pro-am teams. I remember making a couple hole-in-ones and a couple pro-ams. Just having a good time. The guys, I always tried to make it really fun for them, and I had already done, my work on the golf course prior to the Pro-Am. So, that was just kind of like a gravy day, and it was just a day to go out and have a good time and see the golf course, yes, again, for the last time before the tournament starts. But it really wasn't the focus, and it was just more, let's have a good time with these guys. Let's relax before the tournament gets started and show them a good time. And we always did, and we always had a real good time. We always chucked it up and we laughed and throw zingers at each other, and by the end of the day it was it was all in good fun, but we always had fun. And if someone wanted some help and they wanted me to look at their golf swing and give them a few tips, then I was more than happy to chime in and help. But most of the time I really didn't want to, because it just makes it hard, because they're going to try and do what you want, and then it's going to take them out of it's just going to make the day turn differently. You know what I mean? We're there to have a good time, and if they want to work on their golf swing and stuff like that, then we might do that another day on the driving range. But yeah, that day is just all about having a good time. It's not about hitting it great. They don't need to. We can play off of my ball all day long if we want, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I approached it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the idea is you want them to have a good time. They're there, and obviously they're going to learn automatically by watching some of the things that you're doing in that. And one of the things, I'm sure you probably would agree with this as well, one of the things I've heard a lot of other professionals talk about in a pro-am situation that is very, very common is not taking enough club. That was probably one of the biggest ones I've heard with interviewing a lot of players, is that many of the amateurs that they're their pro-am partners should have hit maybe a 5-iron instead of a 6 or a 7-iron in order to approach the green. So that was something. I would probably
agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, it was. That would tend to be top of the list.
Yeah, I would probably tend to agree with that. Absolutely. I think that when they get in those situations where they're playing with another professional, they want to think that they hit it further than they do, and they don't.
Right.
But they're gonna try, and that's fine. That's fine. They're paying a lot of money to play with us that day, and I don't care what I don't care what club you hit. If you want to hit that club, then go for it. And a lot of times, they were always misclubbing themselves. So yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of professionals say that, and it's understandable. Like you said, they we talked about this in the first segment before you came on with the guys in the Coaches Corner panel, and we talked about how a lot of of our club golfers and amateur golfers hit one good shot on the range with their 7-iron, and I think that's the distance they're hitting with their 7-iron, even though the other 10 shots they've hit with that club don't resemble anything like that really good shot, but that's the number they take out in the golf course, whether it be 150 or 155 yards or what have you. And I think that's unfortunately what a lot – and I know you see that. So let's go back to you for a second. This was a question I had for the panel earlier, and I'd like to get your take as a professional, because I think it happens to all of us. Take the scenario where you've had a really, really good front nine and things are really going good, and all of a sudden a couple of bad holes come up. What did you do in the moment? And I'm sure you've had rounds like that where things started off really great in a tournament, and then all of a sudden the wheels started to fall on the bus. How did you recover from that, or did you?
Well, I'm trying to recall if there was a specific event where that happened to me. I'm sure it has. I can only give you an answer based on what I think I would do now, because I'm sure it happened back then, because everything happened to me back then. You could start off hot and have it go cold, or you could start out real cold and then catch a hot hand towards the end of the round too. So it could go both ways.
Right.
Obviously, you'd love to start out cold and end up, a hot hand on the way in. But if it starts to go south and you started off really good, I can maybe think that some of it might have been I got tired, a couple lazy bad swings, maybe. My thought process wasn't real great, pulled some bad clubs, didn't hit the shot I needed to hit. Something like that probably happened, and then that just kind of fed on itself. And then it's hard to, if you got a good caddy, you can somehow stumble your way in without losing everything and then to the range and figure it out. But more often than not, probably for me, it was either I got tired or I got lazy or I made a mental error. Is probably what would have happened.
And I think obviously you would agree too that the most important, this is again where the difference between a tour player such as yourself and obviously our amateurs out there that are listening tonight. I think the main difference is the professionals always manage to learn something from that example. In other words, if they have a bad hole or a bad round, they don't dwell on it in the moment. They move on and they play the next shot that comes up. But at a later point, they will reflect and they'll look back on that round and they'll see maybe it was a mental mistake, maybe it was another mistake of some sort, and they learn from that and then deal with it then. Conversely, the amateur golfer tends to dwell on that issue at the particular time, and that's where the round continues to even further digress, if you will. So if you were to give some advice at this point to our amateurs that are listening tonight, faced with a similar situation, what would you say to them? How would you, if you were their teacher or coach at this particular moment, what would you say to them after that round on how to handle that situation if it were to happen again?
You mean where they started off pretty good and then they lost it coming in? Well, that's
either way.
Yeah, well, you would have to try to identify what was it that caused that, right? What did you get tired? Did you make some lazy swings? Now everybody's in real good shape, right? The whole workout thing is a real big thing, big part of golf, and being really strong and hitting is absolutely as far as you possibly can is huge in golf now, and because they don't care where it goes, they just know that they're going to be hitting wedge in from there. So. They're fit, so they're not getting tired at the end of their rounds. They're not doing that kind of thing. Back when I was playing, fitness didn't come around until Annika introduced that to everybody. So, I was probably into my career, not well into my career, but I was into my career before that all started. And I don't know how much of that she influenced everybody to kind of start working out little by little. But things were, I would say now, if that happened, you got to identify, what do you think it was did you make a mental error? Did you pull the wrong club? You have to kind of try to go back and look at it and say, hey, where did it go wrong and what was kind of going on at that time? What did I do? So this way, when you go back out, if you ever get in that situation again, you don't want to make those same mistakes again. Don't learn anything if you keep making the same mistakes over and over again. So if there's a way to identify what happened, I guess that's the only way that you can really prevent it from happening again. And, a lot of times if you keep your stats too, maybe you just weren't, hitting the greens and you just weren't getting it up and down. You just don't know. We used to keep stats on our cards. I think most players do. They want to kind of know where they're at, what went wrong that day. It's always a quick overview of what happened that day, That's always good to do. Keep some stats, putts, how many fairways you hit, how many greens did you hit, did you get it up and down from the sand or from the grass, and kind of look at that and say, hey, I need a little work on this. This went fine. So, because at the end of the day, if you're playing in a tournament, if you can't sit there and say, well, I don't really know what happened, and you just go to the driving range, but you hit it real good that day, well, you don't need to be at the driving range making yourself tired hitting balls. Go figure out what was it that caused the problem and go work on that and then get the heck out of there. I don't know. I see a lot of kids go into the driving range right after they're done, and a lot of times they hit it fine. I don't find that that's absolutely necessary. I think it just makes you tired, and then just go figure out what it is that you didn't do right and go fix that.
Yeah, I think, and you raised a great point, Danielle, and that is to, keep stats during a round. How many putts are you making? And more often than not, as I know you're aware, is the short game more often than not is where you're going to lose strokes. I think a lot of our amateur golfers worry too much about their tee shots, which not to say that they're not important too, but you're only hitting, 13, 14 drivers in most rounds, and the rest of it is your short game. And for some reason, they just want to see how far they can hit it out in the driving range, and don't seem to care too much about how many chips and pitch shots are accurate and putts they make. They just seem to figure, well, if I can get it down there, 275 yards or what have you, I'll worry about it when I get down the fairway. But short game is obviously important to you, and you actually are doing some clinics now, correct?
I am, actually, yes. Short game is important to me. Again, I attribute everything to back when I was in high school and having and developing the short game there. And I love that part of the game because I never get bored. I can go to the golf course all day long, and I don't have to stand on the driving range and for a couple of hours. I can stay there for 45 minutes or an hour if I want and hit some range balls, but I could spend the rest of the day because there's so much to do in the short game area, and there's so many shots that you can practice. And I love the creativity of being in the short game area. I just love that part of it because I'm very creative, and I have really good touch and feel, so I like to do those kinds of, I could stay there all day long. So that part was always fun, and I am doing some clinics. I'm actually going to do one in Sedona, Arizona on October 14th and 15th, and I'm starting to develop a few more after.
Very good. Let me ask you, while we're on short game in that, what do you do to make it fun? I mean, I know you enjoy it, and I obviously enjoy working on the short game as well, but what do you do to make it interesting for your students? Because that's an area, and I think that's one of the biggest complaints I hear as a teacher professional from students is, well, it's just not fun to practice on the putting green. It's just not fun hitting bunker shots. What do you do? Do you kind of make some games out of it, or what do you do to kind of make it a little bit more interesting and a little more challenging?
I wonder why they say that, because I find that to be.
I don't know.
I find that to be like a lot of fun, and I find it to be hard, and that's what makes it fun. So it's like, well, is going and hitting 300-yard drives, that doesn't seem fun to me, but I don't hit it 300 yards either, so I don't know. But they, that it would be fun, yeah, if I was hitting it super far. But like you said, you only do that 14 times, not even sometimes. You've got par threes in there, so you're not even hitting 14. You're not even hitting. Right. You might even be hitting some fairway woods off some of those tees. So it is, for me, the short game. Let's just say if I was going to teach somebody, this is what would make it fun. Instead of taking a bucket of balls or a bunch of balls down to a chipping area, just take 10 of your own balls if you want. So this way you're practicing with your own ball, and you know how it feels, and you know how it's going to react. Take 10 balls, and I work in 10s just because of the percentage. It's easy to figure it out, right? So if you're going to hit a chip shot and you're only going to go 20 feet up there, and you're going to try and take your 10 balls and try to get better than 50%. So you got to get 5 or more balls within a certain area. So give yourself a 4 or 5 foot circle if you want to start out just to practice. If you're practicing and you're not a real good player, make your circle bigger, and then kind of make your circle smaller as you kind of go along and get a little bit better. But for me, I probably would make that circle at least 3 feet, and I take my 10 balls and I start chipping. And if I couldn't get at least 50% or more, then I got to bring them all back, and I got to stay there till I do. And then I would move that, and then I would say to myself, well, I got to get at least 60% or 70%, 6, 7, or 8, 9 balls. You make it so that it gives you a little bit of pressure. It gives you that, hey, I got to do this, kind of like a tournament situation. You're only using 10 balls, so you're not getting tired. So you're not sitting there just mindlessly hitting a bucket of balls at the same place and just kind of reloading and just hitting, because that doesn't do anybody any good. And it kind of keeps your mind engaged, and it gets your nerves kind of going. So I like the 10-ball thing. If you just do that, and you just take your 10 balls, and you can go around, and you can do that in the bunker too. You can take your 10 balls, and if you can't get 50% of them out of the bunker, and you got to bring them all back in here and do it again. So it just gives you like a nice feel, and you don't feel like it's just mindless chipping.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's a great idea too of approaching it. I do very similar to you, and again, I don't have students that I work with bring a whole bucket of balls. We just again usually do 10, something very similar, and at the various different stations that we might have, whether it's on the putting green or it's just off and we're working on our chipping and what have you. But I do the same thing. And you have to make it fun, and you have to make it interesting, and of course it's challenging, which I think adds to a little bit of the anxiety and stress that a lot of folks have, and that's probably why they prefer to try to hit the 300-yard drives, because they figure even if I don't get it there, it's fun watching the ball go out, further than, plopping it 20 or 30 feet onto a green. So I like you.
Oh, you got
I understand.
Yeah, you got the
right.
twitchy muscles, when you're chipping, you got those twitchy those little muscles that, people get a little nervous and they get a little twitchy, and they, and they don't like that.
Yeah.
So, it's easier to get up there and just bang out drives and bang out 3-woods and, and hit 7-irons really hard. That's a lot easier for everybody. And they feel like, that they can do that even if they're nervous, but it's always hard when you get down there and you get into these little moves and these tiny little things, and and you have to be a little more precise, and that's why I think it's so much fun, and that's why I think you could spend if people would just spend a little bit more time down there, they wouldn't get like that. They would gain a lot more confidence. Yeah, they gain a lot more confidence, and they would get it a lot quicker, and they wouldn't have those kinds of fears.
I agree. I think if more of the folks out there worked on their short game, and some of these areas that you just mentioned, I think that they would have a much more enjoyment. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to hit it, further and create more distance. We all want to get a little more distance, in our game. But at the end of the day, you can hit it 250 yards down the middle. But if you can't, close the deal and get it in par or what have you, you're not going to have a very enjoyable round. And I think this is why statistically, the percentages for when it comes to handicaps are still so high. It's because people are working on the opposite side. Instead of working on around the green, they're working off the tee box and figuring, well, if I can hit it farther, that's going to solve my problem. Or if I get a new driver, that's what's going to make things better for me. And the truth of the matter is they need to be working from the green back. And I think that's an area that they'll do, and I know that's what you're doing in your short game. You mentioned a few moments ago about working out. Tell us a little bit about that. What are you doing now to keep yourself engaged and doing the things that you need to do?
Well, so recently, just earlier this year, my husband and I, we just decided that we were not going to live in these bodies that we were in and the way that they were and the way that we felt. And so we did something about it. And, he lost 20 pounds and I lost 16 pounds. And we started eating better. I like to cook, and we're eating now organically or naturally. Nothing that's processed, no processed foods and no sugars. And those kinds of things. So we're really watching the amount of food as well, and then all of those things. And it has really helped. I took away all the inflammation that I had in my body, which was I didn't realize I had that much in. And I realized also too what foods that I was allergic to that made me swell up and made me not feel good. And then those I stay away from now. And I feel so much better. And I work out. I'm working out 3 days a week. And I've been working out in this awful heat that we have here. But I have a good friend of mine, Arnie, Fonseca. He is my close friend and trainer, and he has been working my sister and I out, and I am a lot stronger now. And I've had a couple of knee surgeries, so I've just wanted to just feel better, and I feel good, and I sleep better, and I'm getting a lot stronger, and I feel like that is going to help me in my golf game as well, because I'm not a very big person, and I never have been, and I'd never hit the ball really far. I was never known as a good ball striker. But I want to be a little better. And I think I'm seeing that translate my strength into hitting it a little bit further. So I'm excited about that.
Well, and it also does other things too, Danielle, and we're going to talk about food here in just a minute because I know that's something that you're equally passionate about. But just to talk about what you just mentioned here about getting into better shape and just feeling, better all the way around, I think that we've kind of gotten away from our traditional eating, if you will, and we've fallen into this trap of processed foods, and because it's quick and it's easy and it's convenient and that sort of thing. And you hear people complaining that they're feeling lethargic all the time, and low energy, and they're hopped up on sugars and whatnot. And people don't look at golf as being as hard on the body say other sports are, but that's not really true. I mean, you need a lot of stamina to go 18 holes, and especially if you're stringing 3 or 4 rounds together, in the week, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to be able to do that, and especially in areas like where you are now in the desert, if you will. It's hot, and it's if you're not keeping yourself in good shape and you're not keeping yourself hydrated, it's very easy to become lethargic, partway through the round. So if people want to play better golf and be able to last longer and have more energy, when they're hitting 15, 16, 17, and 18th hole, they need to take better care of themselves. And obviously this is something that you've recognized and your husband's recognized, and you're making changes, as we all should be doing that. So kudos to you for doing that. I mentioned we were going to talk about cooking. Your father was a chef, so I'm assuming you got some good tips from him, and you guys have some restaurants as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so in the beginning of the show, you mentioned that my dad had a restaurant. He no longer has that restaurant. He did retire. Okay. He sold that about a year and a half ago. My dad's 81 years old now, so he sold that just prior to his 80th birthday, and he was in the business his whole life, and he, towards those last couple of years, he really didn't want to be. He just didn't want to be doing it anymore. It's a lot of hard work, and anybody that knows anything about what my father did as far as his food and how he cooked it and how he prepared it and how he made it, nobody would do what my dad did for 1 week, much less, 50 some years that he did it. So it was time for him to move on and retire, and he did. And I'm happy that he did. He did it actually at the perfect time, obviously, with this pandemic now going on. He got out, and he plays golf now, and he's able to do that. And but I grew up in the restaurant business, and since I was a baby and a child, and I remember it. I remember lots of things about the restaurant business and growing up in all the places that my dad had out here. And I love to cook. And he still teaches me things now, and I ask him questions and stuff. So my grandfather developed a cookbook, and my father and I are now redoing that cookbook. And I'm just in the stage of rewriting some of those recipes, and I want to bring those back to life, and I'm going to put them in a nice book, and I'm going to probably put some golf stories in there and some things like that. So hopefully that'll be a lot of fun to put together, and hopefully people will get a kick out of that.
It's interesting. So many good things happen around the dinner table. With especially, in my case and yours, when you come from, an Italian background, particularly, and you have big dinners, and you got together. My family growing up, we got together. Not the kids, of course, but the adults got together, and they would have it might be a ravioli making, day or gnocchi or something else, and they would spend, the whole day, making it and preparing it. And, in those days, a lot of times, the aunts and the uncles would get together and they'd, open a little wine or something along the way. Of course, that was always part of the deal. And I know you can relate. And, they would make up batches of it. Then each of them would bundle it up and take some home, and it would last them, for a little while, and then they'd get back together and do it again, the next time. Was that some of the memories that you had growing up as well with your family, and particularly your father, and maybe even your grandfather, of that type of thing where they would get together and the meal was not just, let's sit down and eat and go out and do whatever. It was almost like a little mini project, if you will. What were your memories?
Oh gosh, my memories in my family. Oh, my mom and dad used to love to entertain. Oh, loved it. They always had people over. They were always cooking and they were always entertaining. We always had people over. And if they weren't coming over, my mom and dad were always going out. And they left me and my sister with babysitters back when we were younger. But I do remember. You go over to my grandmother's house and you walk in the door and you could just smell the sauce and the meatballs, and that was it. That was our Sunday meal. It was the meatballs. It was the meat in the sauce. It was all so tender, and it would just fall apart, and it would just, it was so good. But that was it. That was what we did. My dad, to this day, made his own sausage in the restaurant. And I just was over at his house the other day, and he was making sausage. My dad's retired now, and he's home. He was making sausage because his sausage was so good. It was ridiculous. And I said to him, we have got to figure out a way to sell this. But it's not like anything that you could ever buy in the store. You just can't. You can't buy that kind of sausage in the store. And he's making it, and it's fast. That's the kind of stuff I remember. I used to help my dad in the restaurant a lot. Make sausage, make meatballs. I used to weigh them. They had to be a certain weight, and then I'd roll them up. And the best time to ever get my dad's sausage was right after it came out of the oven. He put it in the pizza oven. It would come out, and he would stick it on the chopping block, and he would let it just cool. And just at that point where it had been cooled down, just starting to cool down, that was the best time to dig into it. Absolutely the best. And he'd always tell me not to get into it, and he'd be like, yeah, I'll give you yours, don't touch that. And I would just be wanting to cut into it and eat it. It's so good. But my dad did a lot. He made all of his own sauce. He made his own meatballs. He made his own lasagna, made his own soups. He made a lot of different kinds of soups. He did a lot of stuff. He cut his own steaks. I've never seen a guy, when the meat used to come in, my dad would have a half of a calf come in, and they'd lay that thing on that chopping block, and he'd take his knife to it like he was a surgeon, and he knew exactly where to cut and what to cut off, and not one piece, not even the bones, nothing went to waste. Every single piece of that went to something. Some of it would go, the bones would go on the sauce for flavor. He'd use some of the fatty parts for the sausage, but not a lot. It would all burn off. My dad's sausage was just amazing because it was not fatty at all. And it just he just used everything, so it was great. It was fun to watch him, and when he was in his heyday. I have a funny story. When my dad had a restaurant here in Phoenix, he had Liberace was performing, and my dad knew a lot of people, and in the restaurant business you just knew a lot of people. And Liberace, my dad shut the restaurant down, and he had Liberace come and dine at my dad's place, and he brought 10 of the most gorgeous men you've ever seen. And at the end of the day, at the end of the night, I was able to meet him. I was not able to be out in the dining room when he was out there, but peeked around the corner, and then but I got a chance to meet him, and that was probably one of the highlights of my life. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, he was definitely quite the entertainer, and it would definitely be something that would stick out in your mind for many, many years. What's interesting, Dan, when I hear you, talking about this, and obviously I know that, this is a golf show, and, we talk a little golf, but I think it's also important for people to, listening to the show that, there are so many things and so many great memories. We're all very, very much the same, growing up, that we have different family experiences and we have an opportunity as you did, and I had a very similar experience growing up as well with with my parents and having a lot of entertaining in-house, and when they weren't entertaining in-house, they were going somewhere else, whether it be a relative or friends or what have you, and it was just a very family, very it was just a wonderful time in history to look back on fondly, and those are things that I miss. I'm sure you probably do as well with when we look at sort of today's society and everybody's sort of in a rush and there isn't really the same viewpoint with family and that. So I really hope that we start to gravitate back to that, because I think there were some great life lessons that we all learned in spending time with our family and close friends, and my aunts and uncles played a very big part in my life and growing up and helping to guide me along. It wasn't just my parents. It was a family. It was literally a family, and I got just as much trouble from my uncles and aunts as I did my parents when I was going down the wrong path. So there was many sets of eyes, and it's a different format, but and I know wine was always something. It flowed very well in my family, as I'm sure it probably did yours. Now, your father didn't get into winemaking or anything, did he? As well as cooking?
No, my dad didn't like wine. He just wasn't a wine drinker. Although my husband and I did get into drinking wine here in the last 10, 12 years or so. We've kind of enjoyed learning and drinking different kinds of wines. My dad strictly was a Scotch guy. He was Scotch and water, and that was pretty much it. He'll venture, like if he knows he's with some people who can pick some really good wines and he's not going to snub his nose at it, he'll dive in and drink with us. But I know that's not exactly what he would prefer.
Right.
But just me and my husband, we like that. But he would serve it at the restaurant, and we had quite a big bar at our place, and we'd have some wine there. Not the best, but nobody really kind of came. It was a sports bar. Nobody came in there really for wine. So,
right.
But just me and my husband. We like to dabble into drinking different kinds of wines. We have a little wine fridge here. It's actually not so little, but it's it is a it's just fun.
It's growing.
Fun to keep some good wines. Yeah, have them sit around for a while and then crack them open later on. And we've found some good ones that we like. So
Very good. I know now, and we'll get into it more. For those of you tuning in a little bit later in the broadcast, my very special guest is Danielle Ammaccapane, who has played for many years on the LPGA and now plays on the Legends Tour, which is the senior women's tournaments. I know that you're involved with that as well, and we'll get into that a little bit more because you're going to be joining both myself and my co-host on my Tuesday morning show, the Women of Golf, LPGA professional Cindy Miller, who I know you're familiar with, who also played on the Legends Tour. So we'll talk about that a little bit more on Tuesday, so we'll save that. But share some final thoughts for the listeners. Let's go back to golf for just a second, because we're almost, it's hard to believe this hour has just been flying by. But share some final thoughts, if you would. If you're had a room full of junior golfers, male and female, doesn't matter, what advice would you give them? They're just learning to play this game for the first time.
Advice as to, I'm not sure. I think I understand what you're asking.
Well, just how, if you were talking to a room full of young junior players, let's say, and you wanted to help guide them, they've really maybe not played golf before, they're new to the game. How would you recommend they get started playing? I guess is the way I'm looking at this.
Oh, okay. How would they get started if they were new to the game?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, if if I had some folks like that, and I have taught some people out here, that are new to the game and they want to learn from me. Just starting out with a good coach is certainly important, and learning the basics. Having fun with it at first. Learning the rules, the etiquette of it, learning all those kinds of things, and getting the basics down, the grip, the stance, the basic swing, and just learning and developing that, and just having fun with it. As a beginner, if you're just starting out, you can learn the short game just as easy. You can go and do that kind of stuff as well. And you can mess around down there all day long doing that kind of stuff, But if you decide that once you kind of get into it and you just don't really like it, I know some people, sometimes they stay in it, but, maybe it's just, you don't have to stay in it, Golf is great like that. Like if you just decide it's just not great, then go, you can always find something else to do. There were a lot of people I was growing up with that, they played and then they quit, and then there's some I see getting in later in life, because this game is so great, and you can play till you die, and you can play as early as whenever you're walking. If you can pick up a stick and and you can hit something with it, you can play the game as at that age. So there's so much to it. There is so much to it. One thing I do know that is if you love the game, it's not hard for anybody to, it's not hard for me to tell somebody to go practice and to go do it. They'll just do it. But if they're not really into it all that much, they're not going to go do those kinds of things. It's just, they're just not. I know at my level, it was important, right? You had to practice and you had to get good. But, anybody that's just looking to have a good time with it and wants to play and be with their buddies and their friends and, just go have a great time with it and have a nice attitude when you go to the golf course, and that remind yourself you're not a professional and you're going to go and have a good time, and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from them, and you're going to hit a lot of bad shots, but don't worry about it. Get with a good teacher, someone who can kind of give you those good fundamentals, and then just go have a really great time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you have to, I think you have to go out and have fun. Cindy and I, over the last few years, have interviewed a number of the up-and-comers on the Symetra Tour, which, of course, leads into the LPGA. And many of them, struggled their first rookie year and sometimes even to their second or third season without a win. And suddenly they changed their attitude and decided, you know what, I'm just going to go out here and have fun. And they put a lot less pressure on themselves. And lo and behold, in many cases, the very next week, they went out and won their first tournament. So I agree with that. I think you have to, obviously they have to continue to work hard and focus. Right. But you have to go out and have fun.
Why you started? Yeah, like when you start the game, you start because it's fun. Like I'm not going to go play baseball because I don't think it's fun. If I think it's fun, I'm going to start playing baseball, right, or softball or whatever. But that's the whole gist of it. If I'm having a good time when I'm learning to play the game, if I ever get to that level of great competition and I'm winning, tournament level golf, that kind of level, well, you've got to still remember where you started and how much fun it was growing up doing all that kind of stuff. It doesn't ever change. Nothing ever changed. Nothing has changed about the game. The scores are still the scores. Still, people way back when in the day were shooting in the 60s, and they still are shooting in the 60s. Nothing has changed about the game other than the fact that if you're not winning, then you're not doing what you were doing when you were a kid.
Right.
If you're getting to that level and things have changed for you, then you've changed from maybe who you were when you were playing the game really well when you were younger. So you got to make sure that you look at that and say, hey, wait a minute, just because I'm a professional now doesn't mean that I have to act differently or play differently. No, it just means I'm a professional now and I just have to go and do this for a living. I have to do more of it. But if you love it, that shouldn't be all that hard to do, right? So the attitude is just that. You take what you've learned, what you've done your whole life, and you just take it to the next level.
I couldn't agree more. I think the premise is just to go out there and have fun and enjoy it. And I think when you take that added pressure off of you and just Go out there to have fun. You'd be surprised at what you can accomplish. Well, Danielle, I want to thank you very much for joining me this evening on Golf Talk Live. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to you joining us next Tuesday, Cindy and I, on the Women of Golf show in the morning, and we'll talk a little bit about the Legends Tour and maybe some of the other things that you're doing right now as well. So thank you very much for joining me, and have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next week.
Talking with you. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Danielle. All right. That was my very special guest, LPGA professional and Legends Tour player, Danielle Ammaccapane. Joined me the second half tonight on Golf Talk Live, and sharing a little bit about her experiences on tour and a little bit of personal side of Danielle as well, and we'll share that and more on Tuesday. If you missed tonight's broadcast, go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, and you can catch the recorded version here in just a moment. And then don't forget to join us on the Women of Golf show, also on the blogtalkradio.com network, next Tuesday from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern. You'll be able to hear Danielle as we continue the conversation with my good friend and co-host, LPGA professional Cindy Miller. Have a great week. I will see you next week here on Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody. Thanks for listening to this evening's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. Remember to tune in each week at blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. If you can't join us live, check out the on-demand section for previously aired broadcasts, or listen on any of the following social media platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, CastBox, TalkStream Live, and of course, Spotify. To get updates on future shows and upcoming guests, be sure to visit the show's Facebook page, Golf Talk Live Blog. You can also follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO. Remember to join me live each week for another great broadcast of Golf Talk Live. See you next time. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.